The last time I got a phone call from my dad was 2 years ago, 3 days before he passed away. He was lying in that hospital bed tubes, running everywhere, but his voice was steady when he said, "Jack, you are the son I am most proud of. Everything I am leaving behind will help you build your future." I thought it was just encouragement, the kind of thing a dying father says to comfort his kid. I had no idea that 2 years later his will would become the weapon my brother used to try to destroy our family. My golden child brother Dylan and his fiancée Stephanie demanded I hand over my inheritance so they could have their dream wedding. When I said no, they did something I never imagined anyone, let alone family, would do. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, and subscribe because the story I am about to share might be the most unbelievable thing you hear all week. What Dylan and Stephanie did next will leave you speechless, and honestly, I still cannot believe it myself. So stick around. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in what most people would call a normal middle-class family. My dad Robert ran a small construction company. Nothing fancy, but he worked hard and saved well. My mom Susan taught elementary school and loved her job. Then there was my older brother Dylan, who was 3 years older than me, and honestly, he was the golden child from day one. Dylan was the kid who brought home straight A report cards, while I struggled to maintain a B average. He played varsity basketball, and had college scouts showing up to games when he was just a junior. I tried out for the team twice, and got cut both times. My parents would sit at the dinner table and talk about Dylan's latest achievement for hours. Meanwhile, I would mention that I got promoted to shift supervisor at the hardware store, where I worked part-time, and Mom would interrupt with, "Oh, speaking of work, Dylan just got another raise at his consulting firm." I want to be clear about something. I never hated Dylan for this. It just was what it was. Some kids are born to shine, and some of us are born to watch. I accepted my role early on, but looking back now, I can see how deeply that dynamic shaped everything that came later. The favoritism was not even subtle. When Dylan graduated high school, Dad bought him a brand new Honda Accord. Midnight blue leather seats, the works. When I graduated 2 years later, I got a used bike from a garage sale. Dad said it would build character and teach me the value of working for what I wanted. Dylan went to the University of Washington, and our parents paid every single penny of his tuition room board and even gave him spending money. When it was my turn, they said the college fund had run dry. I ended up at community college taking out loans and working 30 hours a week at that hardware store to make ends meet. Family dinners were the worst. Mom would always steer the conversation back to Dylan. "Did you hear Dylan got promoted again? Or Dylan and Stephanie are looking at houses in that nice neighborhood near Green Lake?" I would try to share something about my life, like how I was learning to do electrical work, or how I had just finished a certification course, but it always felt like I was talking to a wall. Dad would nod politely, but his eyes would light up only when Dylan's name came up. But then everything changed in the last year of Dad's life. I was 26 when Dad got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors gave him maybe a year, probably less. Dylan was busy with his career up in Seattle, about a 3-hour drive away. He would visit maybe once every 3 weeks, stay for a couple hours, then head back. He always had some important meeting or client dinner he could not miss. I made a different choice. I quit my job, moved back into my childhood home, and became Dad's full-time caregiver. Those 8 months were the hardest of my life, but also the most meaningful. I spent countless nights in hospitals holding Dad's hand while he went through chemo. I learned how to change IV bags, manage his medication schedule, and cook the bland foods that were the only things his stomach could handle. During those long nights, Dad and I talked about everything. Life, regrets, dreams, fears. One night about 2 months before he died, Dad looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "You know what, son, I got it all wrong. I spent so many years thinking success meant money and status and achievements. I pushed Dylan so hard because I wanted him to have the life I never did. But I realize now that I missed what really mattered. You have always been here, Jack, even when I did not deserve it, even when I treated you like second best. You stayed." That conversation broke something open in both of us. Dad told me he was changing his will. He wanted to leave me the house and his savings account, which had about $150,000 in it. I told him I did not care about the money. I just wanted more time with him. But Dad insisted. He said, "This is not about money, son. This is about me finally telling you what I should have said your whole life. You matter. You are enough. You always were." Dad passed away on a quiet October morning. I was holding his hand. Dylan made it to the hospital about an hour after Dad took his last breath. He walked in, saw me sitting there, with tears streaming down my face, and the first thing he said was, "Did he say anything about me at the end?" 1 week after the funeral, our family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, called us all in for the reading of the will. His office was downtown, one of those old buildings with dark wood paneling and leather chairs that creaked when you sat down. Mom, Dylan, Stephanie, and I all gathered around this massive conference table. Mr. Harrison was methodical, reading through all the legal language before getting to the important parts. Dylan would receive $25,000. Mom would get the small condo Dad owned on the outskirts of town, which she could rent out for income. And then came my part. I would receive the main house, which was worth about $300,000, and the savings account with $150,000 in it. The room went dead silent. Dylan's face turned white, then red. Mom looked like someone had slapped her. Stephanie's mouth literally fell open. Mom was the first to speak. There must be some mistake. Dylan is the oldest. He is the firstborn son. Surely Robert meant to. Mr. Harrison cut her off gently but firmly. "There is no mistake, Mrs. Peterson. Your husband was very clear and very thorough when we drafted this document. He was of sound mind and knew exactly what he wanted." Dylan stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. He pointed at me, his finger shaking. "What did you do? What did you say to him when he was drugged up on all those pain meds? You manipulated him, did you not? I felt like I had been punched in the gut." "Dylan, I did not. Do not lie to me." His voice was getting louder. "You spent all that time alone with him. You poisoned him against his own family, against me." Mr. Harrison stood up. "Mr. Peterson, I need to remind you that I was present when your father made these decisions. He was completely lucid and made his wishes very clear. If you have concerns, you are welcome to contest the will, but I can assure you that you will not succeed." Dylan grabbed his coat. Stephanie followed her high heels, clicking on the hardwood floor. Before they left, Dylan turned and looked at me with pure hatred. "This is not over, Jack. Not even close." 3 days later, they showed up at the house. The house that was now mine, though it still felt like Dad's place. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the doorbell. I opened it to find Dylan and Stephanie standing there. Stephanie looked different than she had at the funeral. She was always polished, always put together. Blonde hair, perfectly styled designer clothes, the kind of woman who cared a lot about what other people thought. But that day she looked almost predatory. "Jack, we need to talk," Dylan said, pushing past me into the living room. He sat down on the couch, where Dad used to watch football every Sunday. That felt wrong somehow. Stephanie sat next to him, crossing her legs and putting on what I can only describe as a fake, sympathetic smile. "Jack, we understand this whole situation has been hard on everyone. Losing your father, the will, all of it." I sat across from them, my coffee cup warming my hands. "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" Dylan leaned forward. "Look, Stephanie and I are planning our wedding. We have been engaged for almost 2 years, and we want to do it right. We found this amazing resort on the coast, you know, the kind of place people dream about. Ocean views, perfect weather space for 200 guests. That sounds nice," I said carefully. "The problem is Stephanie jumped in a wedding like that costs money. We are looking at about $80,000 for everything we want. Dylan has the $25,000 from your father's will, but we need more." I could see where this was going. "And you want me to give you money?" "Not give," Dylan said quickly. "We want to borrow $50,000. I will pay you back. You have my word." I sat there for a long moment looking at my brother. The brother who had always gotten everything he wanted. The brother who had barely visited Dad in his final months. The brother who had just accused me of manipulation 3 days ago. "Dylan, I cannot do that," I said quietly. "I need that money. The house needs a new roof. The electrical system is outdated. I want to start my own business, like Dad always talked about doing." Stephanie's smile disappeared. But this is Dylan's wedding. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. You cannot be this selfish. That word, selfish. It hit me hard because I had been called that my whole life whenever I dared to want something for myself. I am not being selfish, I said, keeping my voice steady. Dad left me this money for a reason. He wanted me to have a future. I am going to honor that. Dylan stood up, his jaw tight. You are going to regret this decision, Jack. You have no idea what you just started. They left without another word. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I did not know it then, but that conversation was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the pressure campaign started. Mom called me every single day, sometimes multiple times. Jack, honey, you need to reconsider. Dylan has been dreaming of this wedding. Stephanie comes from a wealthy family, and he wants to show them he can provide for her. You cannot let your brother down like this. I tried to explain. Mom, this is what Dad wanted. He made his decision. Your father is not here anymore, she snapped. The living. Have to think about the living. Family takes care of family. But Dylan did not seem to think that rule applied when Dad was dying and needed someone to hold his hand through chemo. Dylan started posting on Facebook. Nothing direct, just vague statements about betrayal and family loyalty. Funny how you find out who people really are when money gets involved, one post read. It got 63 likes and a bunch of comments from relatives asking what was wrong. Dylan would respond with, I will message you privately, and I could only imagine what he was saying about me. My Aunt Marianne, Mom's sister, called me. Jack, I always thought you were such a good boy, but what Dylan is saying about you, I just cannot believe it. What is he saying? I asked. That you manipulated your father when he was vulnerable. That you turned him against his own family. That you are sitting on all that money while your brother struggles. I wanted to defend myself, but I was exhausted. Aunt Marianne, there are two sides to every story. Well, I only know what I have been told, she said coldly, and hung up. I felt completely alone. The family I had grown up with, the people I had known my entire life, were all turning against me. But every time I thought about giving in, I would remember Dad's words in that hospital room. Do not let anyone make you live by their rules, son. You have spent too long doing that already. So I held firm. I did not give Dylan the money. And that apparently was when they decided to take it anyway. 3 months after Dad died, I needed to withdraw some money to fix the roof. We had gotten hit by a bad storm in early January, and water was leaking into the upstairs bedroom. I went to the bank on a Tuesday morning, filled out the withdrawal slip, and handed it to the teller. She typed on her computer, frowned, typed some more, then looked up at me with an apologetic expression. Sir, I am sorry, but your account appears to be frozen. Frozen? What do you mean frozen? It says here, there is a legal dispute pending on this account. You will need to speak with the branch manager. The manager, a woman named Mrs. Chen, explained that a lawyer representing Dylan Peterson had filed a claim stating that the will was invalid due to my father's diminished mental capacity from pain medication. Until the court resolved the dispute, the account was locked. I called Mr. Harrison immediately. They are really doing this, I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Yes, Harrison sighed. Dylan has hired Patricia Cole. She is known for being aggressive in estate disputes. But Jack, your father was completely coherent when we made these arrangements. I have documentation recordings, medical records, showing his mental state. They will not win this. But my account is frozen. I cannot access my own money. These things take time. I will file a motion to unfreeze the account, but it might be a few weeks. Those few weeks turned into 2 months. The roof kept leaking. I had to put buckets in the bedroom and listen to the steady drip, drip, drip every time it rained. I was working as a handyman for a property management company, barely making enough to cover bills. The stress was eating me alive. Then Mr. Harrison arranged a mediation meeting. We all gathered in his conference room again, but this time Dylan had his lawyer with him. Patricia Cole was in her 50s, gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun wire-rimmed glasses, and the coldest eyes I had ever seen. Gentlemen, she began laying out a folder thick with documents. We have substantial evidence that Robert Peterson was under the influence of prescription opioids during the time he allegedly changed his will. Medical records show he was taking high doses of morphine and oxycodone. These medications are known to cause confusion, hallucinations, and impaired judgment. Mr. Harrison countered immediately. I have audio recordings of my conversations with Mr. Peterson during the will preparation. He was articulate, logical, and fully aware of his decisions. Furthermore, his oncologist has provided a statement confirming his mental competency. Patricia smiled thinly. Doctors can be wrong, and recordings can be selective. Dylan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking almost smug. Jack, you know this is not fair. Dad was not thinking straight at the end. He was scared and in pain, and you took advantage of that. Something in me snapped. I took advantage. I was the one there every single day. I was the one holding his hand while he threw up from chemo. Where were you, Dylan? Where were you when he was scared at 3 a.m? Oh, right. You were at client dinners. I had responsibilities, Dylan shot back. Some of us have real careers, and some of us cared more about family than careers, I said. Patricia held up her hand. This is not productive. Mr. Peterson, my client is prepared to take this to trial if necessary. I assure you we will paint a very unflattering picture of your behavior during your father's final months. The meeting ended with nothing resolved, except more hostility. As we were leaving, I happened to walk out right behind Dylan and Stephanie. They did not see me at first, and I heard Stephanie whisper, "Do not worry. If this does not work, Plan B will." "What is Plan B?" Dylan murmured back. "You know what Plan B is. We discussed it." They turned and saw me. Stephanie's face flushed. Dylan grabbed her arm and pulled her toward their car. I stood there in the parking garage, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. What was Plan B, I found out 2 weeks later. I was at work replastering a wall in one of the rental units when my phone buzzed with an email notification from the bank. Your transfer request has been processed. I had not made any transfer request. I dropped my tools and called the bank, immediately demanding to speak to Mrs. Chen. When she pulled up my account, her voice changed. "Mr. Peterson, it shows here that $50,000 was transferred out of your account yesterday afternoon, authorized by a notarized letter of authorization, bearing your signature. I never signed anything. I never authorized any transfer. Sir, we have the document on file. It was submitted by Dylan Peterson on your behalf. I got to the bank in 15 minutes. Mrs. Chen showed me the letter. It looked official, complete with my forged signature at the bottom, but I never signed it. This is fraud, I said, my hands shaking as I held the paper. That is not my signature. Are you certain? I am absolutely certain. Look, I signed my name 3 times on a piece of paper. My signature had a very distinctive way the J connected to the rest of my name, and the K at the end always had a little loop. The forged signature was close but not quite right. Mrs. Chen agreed to file a fraud report. The bank's investigation team got involved. But the money was already gone, transferred into an account in Dylan's name. I filed a police report that same day. Detective Carlos Martinez was assigned to my case. He was in his 40s with tired eyes that suggested he had seen too much of people's worst sides. But he listened carefully as I explained everything. The will dispute the pressure Stephanie's mention of a Plan B. Do you have any proof that your brother was planning to commit fraud? He asked. No direct proof. Just that conversation I overheard. That is not enough for a warrant. But I can investigate the documents. Forgery leaves traces. The investigation took 3 weeks. Detective Martinez called me into the station to show me what they had found. The email submitting the fraudulent authorization had come from an address designed to look like mine, Jack Peterson. Official, instead of my real email, Jack Peterson. Real. Someone had gone to effort to make it look legitimate. The IP address traced back to Seattle, specifically to an area within 2 miles of where Dylan lived. This is good circumstantial evidence, Detective Martinez said, but we need more. We need someone to admit what happened, or we need to catch them in the act of something else. That is when I made my decision. I was going to get Dylan to confess. I called Dylan the next day, forcing my voice to sound defeated. Dylan, hey. Listen, I have been thinking about everything that has happened. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have helped you from the start. There was a long pause. What are you saying? I am saying, maybe we can work something out. Can we meet? Just you, me and Stephanie. No lawyers, no drama, just family. I could practically hear him smiling through the phone. Yeah, we can do that. How about Thursday? There is a coffee shop near your place. Perfect. Thursday came. I had bought a small digital voice recorder, the kind that fits in your shirt pocket. I tested it 3 times that morning to make sure it worked. Then I drove to the coffee shop, my heart hammering in my chest. Dylan and Stephanie were already there, sitting at a corner table. Stephanie looked relaxed, confident even. She was wearing expensive sunglasses pushed up on her head and holding some fancy latte with foam art. I sat down across from them. Thanks for meeting me. Of course, little brother Dylan said, and there was something patronizing in his tone that made my jaw clench. So what changed your mind? I have just been so stressed, I said, which was not a lie. The legal battle, the family drama. I miss having you as my brother. And I realize now that maybe Dad did not really understand what he was doing at the end. Stephanie reached across the table and patted my hand. Jack, that is so mature of you to admit. So, here is what I am thinking, I continued. I will give you the $50,000 for the wedding, but I need to understand something first. What happened with my bank account last month? Dylan's smile faltered just slightly. What do you mean $50,000 disappeared from my account? The bank said there was an authorization letter with my signature, but I never signed anything. Dylan glanced at Stephanie. A look passed between them. I do not know what you are talking about, Jack. Come on, Dylan. Do not play games. If we are going to move forward as a family, I need honesty. Did you take that money? Stephanie laughed, but it sounded nervous. Jack, you do not have any proof of anything. Maybe you signed something and forgot about it. I leaned forward, making my voice low and intense. I know something happened. Just tell me the truth. I am not going to the cops or anything. I just need to hear it from you. Dylan stared at me for a long moment. Then something in his face hardened. You want the truth. Fine. Yes, I took it. I had someone create the paperwork. Your signature was not that hard to copy. And honestly, Jack, you deserved it. That money should have been mine from the beginning. Dad was out of his mind at the end and you manipulated him. We only took what was rightfully Dylan's. Stephanie added, her voice sharp now. You do not deserve any of that inheritance. You were nothing but a glorified nurse for a dying old man. The words kept coming. Dylan talked about how easy it was to find someone who could forge documents. Stephanie bragged about how they had planned it perfectly. They thought they had won. They thought they were untouchable. I let them talk. The recorder in my pocket captured every word. I took the recording straight to Detective Martinez. I sat in his office while he listened to the whole thing, his expression growing darker with each passing minute. When it finished, he looked at me. Jack, this is exactly what we needed. This is a full confession to fraud, identity theft, and forgery. All felonies. What happens now? Now I bring them in for questioning. With this recording, they will not be able to deny it. The district attorney will almost certainly press charges. The next day, Detective Martinez called Dylan and Stephanie in for questioning. When confronted with the recording, they tried to backtrack, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming. Dylan Peterson and Stephanie Marshall were arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The case went to trial 4 months later. I had to testify, which was one of the hardest things I have ever done. Sitting in that courtroom looking at my brother, sitting next to his lawyer, I felt this profound sadness. This is not how it was supposed to be. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found both of them guilty on all counts. The judge was not lenient. Dylan was sentenced to 3 years of probation, ordered to repay the $50,000 plus an additional $20,000 in damages and legal fees. He also received 300 hours of community service. Stephanie got 2 years of probation and a $10,000 fine. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of their problems. The dream wedding never happened. Stephanie called off the engagement 2 months after the sentencing. Apparently, being convicted of fraud was not the fairy tale she had signed up for. Dylan lost his job at the consulting firm. Turns out companies do not like employing people with criminal records for financial crimes. Last I heard, he was working at a call center making barely above minimum wage. My mom called me the day after the sentencing. She was crying. "How could you do this to your brother? How could you send him to jail?" "Mom, I did not send him anywhere. He made his choices. He made a mistake. He was desperate. You could have forgiven him." "He did not make a mistake, Mom. He planned it. He executed it. And he only regretted it when he got caught. That is not someone who deserves forgiveness without consequences." She hung up on me. We did not speak for 6 months after that. Other family members slowly learned the full story. Some apologized for how they had treated me. My Aunt Marianne sent a card that said I should have listened to your side. Others just quietly disappeared from my life, too embarrassed or too loyal to Dylan to reach out. I spent a lot of time alone after the trial. I fixed the roof on the house. I repainted the kitchen. I built a workshop in the garage. I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, who specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand that what I was feeling, this weird mix of relief and grief, was completely normal. "You did not lose your brother in that courtroom," she told me during one session. "You lost him long before that. Maybe you never really had him at all." That was hard to accept, but it was true. The Dylan I had imagined the brother I wanted to have was not the same person as the Dylan who actually existed. I had been holding on to a fantasy. About 6 months after everything settled, I used part of Dad's money to open a small woodworking shop. Dad had always talked about wanting to work with his hands, creating beautiful things, instead of just managing construction crews. I named it Peterson Woodworks in his honor. It was not fancy. Just me, a couple of apprentices making custom furniture and cabinets. But every morning when I walked in and saw Dad's picture hanging on the wall, I felt peace. Mom eventually came around. It took almost a year, but she called one day and asked if she could visit. We sat in the workshop surrounded by the smell of sawdust and wood stain, and she cried, "I am sorry, Jack. I was so wrong. About everything. About how we treated you growing up. About taking Dylan's side. About all of it." I hugged her. "I know, Mom. Your father would be proud of you. Not just for this," she gestured around the shop, "but for standing up for yourself. For not letting us push you around anymore." Dylan and I have not spoken since the trial. I heard through Mom that he moved to Arizona trying to start over where nobody knows his story. Part of me hopes he finds some kind of redemption out there. But another part of me, the part that remembers everything, knows that some bridges burn so completely that you cannot rebuild them. And maybe that is okay. I learned something important through all of this. Family is supposed to be your safe place, the people who love you no matter what. But sometimes blood relationship is not enough. Sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones who hurt you most because they know exactly where to strike. And when that happens, protecting yourself is not selfish. It is survival. Setting boundaries is not about being cruel. It is about respecting yourself enough to say this far and no further. Dad's inheritance was not just money and property. It was his way of finally telling me what he could not say for most of my life. You matter. You are worthy. You deserve good things. I think about him every day. I think about those last 8 months we had together, how we went from distant father and son to truly knowing each other. I would trade every penny of that inheritance for one more conversation with him, one more chance to hear him laugh. But since I cannot have that, I try to honor his memory by living the life he wanted for me. A life where I do not have to prove my worth to anyone. A life where I choose people who choose me back. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything turned out. The answer is complicated. I regret that my family fell apart. I regret that Dylan chose greed over integrity. I regret that I had to spend months in legal battles instead of properly grieving my father. But I do not regret standing my ground. I do not regret protecting what Dad wanted me to have. And I do not regret learning finally that saying no to others is sometimes the only way to say yes to yourself. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family, knowing it might cost you the relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories help me feel less alone in all of this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is struggling to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope wherever you are in your journey, you find the courage to honor what you deserve. Take care of yourselves, and remember that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing.